Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Eliana Aaron, Director of EMA Care. I hope everyone is doing well and taking care of their loved ones. Today, I'm going to, first of all, give you a review about what's going on right now in Israel. And secondly, I'm going to talk about where this is going and what my analysis is as to how this happened, which can help us figure out how to stop it, but also figure out how to prevent this situation from happening in other countries. Because I've analyzed what other countries are doing right. I've discussed some of that in our group. And based on that and based on what's happening now, I think we'll have a good idea about where we went wrong and perhaps even how to fix this. So first of all, I'm going to talk about where we are right now. I'm going to just share my screen, and you can see here that this is our epidemiological curve. Every week there is going to be a slight bump, and that's because of Shabbat. There's less testing on Shabbat. We're averaging almost 6% positive rates now, which basically is happening because we're testing a lot of people. A lot more people are testing positive, including 50% of the positive cases actually being asymptomatic. In the last wave, a very small percentage were asymptomatic because we didn't have widespread testing. So we have actually close to met our goal of testing, and we're realizing we actually need to increase that. The problem is that the system in Israel is not really set up for a heck of a lot more testing than we have. So basically, I'm going to go back to share my screen just to show you a few of the analyses that I do and explain what the rationale is and what this really tells us. So the delay of critical cases, basically, if you remember what we put up yesterday, yesterday was July, what's the date, the 13th, so we put up the 12th, but we're doing analysis right now on the 12th. We're always now going to be about 12 hours behind, primarily because the country delays putting out yesterday's numbers because the labs are not that organized. So we're getting a lot of data throughout the day, and actually the numbers are being adjusted for days later. So if you carefully analyze what I'm putting out, it actually changes every day, but usually slightly, usually not more than a few cases here or there. In some cases, it could be a few dozen, but I think we all pretty much see what the trend is. So what we know, based on what I put out, is that the pattern of this disease is such that the incubation period is very long. We have a 14-day potential incubation period. So what happens is that people get contagious. Oop, my video stopped. Great, sorry about that. I will share my screen again. So basically, don't know how that happened, but basically, people get the disease, they catch it, and within 14 days, they start getting symptoms, or they don't get symptoms, okay? So assuming that people do get symptoms, it's usually in the first week, but it can be up to 2 weeks. And then once you start getting symptoms, you don't deteriorate immediately. That's pretty rare. Most people who will end up deteriorating, becoming a critical case, will end up doing so later on. It's a progressive disease. So as an example, I've heard of many, many cases where people were not symptomatic and all of a sudden they can't breathe. You know, they may not have known they even had it. They had no symptoms for, you know, the whole time. And all of a sudden they wake up one day and they can't breathe and they're very short of breath. And they will find on an x-ray that someone has very advanced lung disease, meaning they've had this virus for quite some time, probably weeks, but the virus is smarter than we are, smarter than technology is, right? So the virus adapts immediately. The virus is sneaky. So it affects people often in such a subtle way that by the time someone realizes they're sick, the virus has already taken over. And that's what we're seeing a lot with this disease, is it really hits you very suddenly, even though you've had it for a while. So the critical cases are delayed, meaning you could get sick here, but the wave of critical cases is always delayed. So when we start getting sick, so here's the critical cases of the first wave. So we started having new cases. You could see the spike started going up, and then the critical cases was delayed. So if here we started seeing a spike, it still took about a week and a half maybe, until we started seeing increases. And it was always slightly delayed. So you could look here and say the peak of new cases came somewhere around April 3rd, but the peak of critical cases came 2 weeks later on approximately the 17th of April. So that's pretty typical. And if you look more carefully, you'll see the ventilator cases were actually even more delayed than that. You could see this is a few days later than that. And these were the peaks. So these are delayed indicators. So at the start of this second wave, what you saw is we never went down to zero, okay? So our new cases were very low. It was never zero. We were always getting new cases. And what ended up happening is that we started getting this uptick here. Remember, it was May 27th, we started seeing this uptick, which was different than all this nice flat area here. But nothing was changing with the critical cases or ventilators because those are delayed. Now, in the case of this particular wave, when we have better management, we have better population screening, we're testing a lot more people, we're finding a lot more cases now than were probably undetected the first wave. So what happened here is we actually have a much more significant delay. You can see from May 27th, which is approximately here, until somewhere around June 24th or so. I would say even, you could go as far, yeah, I would say like June 25th maybe. Over here, you could start seeing a slight uptick. And really at the beginning of July is where you start seeing these very sharp inclines. And even to this day, ventilators have not sharply increased, although they have increased for sure. So basically, what that means is that the delay was almost a month. Remember that when the first part of this wave hit, these were almost all young people. These were students, these were teachers. The school, we called it the school wave. You know, the kids came back to school, stopped wearing their masks, and this is sort of what triggered it. But of course, the kids don't live in a dorm, they live all over Jerusalem, and then they have friends all over the country, and this slowly started spreading. So you could see the exponential growth really started in the middle of June, but this is the delayed factor. So if we go here, this is one measure for figuring out how well controlled our case numbers are. So what normally happens when you have a wave is that you have more new cases than newly recovered cases. And then what ends up happening is you have, as the number of new cases decreases, the recoveries, which is also a delayed factor. Remember, it takes 2 to 7 weeks to recover. So you'll see that the orange line, which is the recovered, is a mirror image of the blue wave, which is the initial wave, but delayed by quite a significant period of time, like I would say 3 weeks at least. So what we see here is obviously we have a much bigger wave going on now. We're more than double the number of cases that we had at our peak in the last wave, and that's very typical for a second wave. And what we're seeing now is that we are seeing some increased recoveries, because remember, the people recovering now got sick a few weeks ago. So this is going to continue going up, and when the new wave of new cases starts to go down, that's when we're going to start seeing a peak of the recoveries. So we might start seeing hundreds of recoveries a day, as we did after the first wave. So that's an indicator just to get an overall picture of what's going on. This is some good news that I discussed today, which is that we saw, this is 1 week averages. And so it's important to not just look, you know, the numbers for the epidemiological curve, little tiny lines every single day, and you could overanalyze them. This is really giving us averages per week, which is easier for us to take Shabbat into factor, to factor that in. And this gives us a better trend idea. So the good news here is that this week we did not double our average caseload. And that's really good because the week before we did, and the week before we did, and the week before we almost did. So you can see this was really exponential growth. Look how sharp and high that curve is. It's going almost straight up. And even though this looks like it's continuing, it's actually not. It's actually slightly slowing down. We're hoping this is the beginning of a better trend. So that's a really good thing for us to keep an eye on, but it's a longer term trend. We're not going to have an answer for probably a couple of weeks. What we could see, I could show you this real quick. This just tells us out of the new cases in the last week where they are in the population. So you could see here that this age range here, which is the 20 to 29-year-olds, they are over 2,000 cases in this past week. Because remember, we've had quite a lot of cases this week. So what this is showing us is that a huge percentage of the population that got it in the last week are the young people, and a small percentage are the older people. We saw that in the first wave also, although this wave really started off even more with the young people who don't tend to have complications as much. The disproportionate number of elderly who end up dying is what we really need to keep an eye on. So this is telling us in the wave that we've had, what percentage has increased since the wave began, right? So that would be considered May 27th, which is when the outbreak was discovered in the gymnasium high school in Jerusalem. And what we can see here also is what's going on this week. So if you take a look at the 20 to 29-year-olds, they're really the only population that went up significantly from the trend in this past week. So they really got more cases this week relative to this wave, while teenagers had less, etc. So it's just something that we're keeping an eye on, again, because we want to know which populations are being more affected. This is selected cities that we're watching. Jerusalem has the most active cases there. I think 2,800 active cases right now in Jerusalem. What this is showing us is to look at 1 day and 7 days of how many new cases we've had so that we can see how we're doing. So in the last week, you could see that there have been 1,800 new cases in Jerusalem. And if you take a look over here, you can see that in the last day, there have been, looks like about 175. And then if you look at July overall, you can see that there's been about a 28% increase in cases just in July. And remember, it's July 12th that we're analyzing here. So that is quite significant. In Beitar Illit, it's over 50% in the last week. So that's why Beitar Illit is in a shutdown. We're going to talk about that in our next video. But I'm concerned about some of these numbers. Tel Aviv is already up by 40%. Tel Aviv has a higher percentage of new cases in the last week than Bnei Brak. And Bnei Brak has many more actual cases overall, because in the first wave, they got hit very badly. They were shut down for long periods of time. And what you can see here is that in July, Tel Aviv has more cases than Bnei Brak. I put Ra'anana here. Ra'anana got hit very badly, but one fell swoop with those illegal teenage parties. And since then, they've had a trickle of new cases every day, somewhere around 10 new cases a day. So that's just some of the stuff we're keeping track of, as well as the testing rates, where we're at about a 6% positive rate now, which means that's pretty high. Remember, we were at 0.2, 0.3% during our lull. So we're watching the rates go up. We're also watching the actual numbers of tests go up, and our national goal was 30,000 a day. And you can see we do need to have more than that, and the government's going to have to ramp up capacity. They have started the Kupot Cholim started outsourcing lab services to MyHeritage and possibly to other private labs. So that is pretty much what's going on. I'm going to quickly just show one more thing, which I showed a few weeks ago, and I think people want to see it, which is basically the logarithmic scale of what's going on in the world. I've selected specific countries. So this basically is a scale that tells us what the trend is in terms of looking at an overall trend and not just the numbers. So a logarithmic scale means that each of these lines going this way, which is the confirmed cases, and this way, so we have the total confirmed cases, we have the confirmed cases in the last week, and each of those is a multiplier of 10. So you have 100, then you have 1,000, then you have 10,000. So it's like a growth chart for children, where it's not, it kind of, as the time goes, it kind of gets more condensed in order to see a trend better. So what happens here is that this is the 2-day doubling time of confirmed cases. So once you get up to this kind of an angle, which is usually early on when you have one case and then you have 2 cases, you're doubling in, in a day or 2 days. So once you have that going on, usually it slows down at some point. And so we've seen that. I'm just going to play this. This is the history of the pandemic with a few select countries. And what you could see here, you see that South Korea was affected early. You can see that the US, when it started, was way out there and continues to be a real outlier. Israel, in this area here, was actually, it was May, we were doing well, and look at Israel go up. Watch Israel, see that? Israel's going up and going back to the same curve that we had before. So if we take a look at Israel, okay, the countries that had upticks, so what countries here had upticks? Germany had an uptick, if you take a look. See that? It went up, it went down. They might still be bouncing around there, but they haven't gone back to the same pattern. South Korea, having an uptick. You could sort of take a look there at what's going on. They had an uptick, but it went up, and then they have stabilized it where they are. Switzerland had an uptick. I've been tracking all these countries for months. Switzerland had an uptick, but what you have with an uptick is you have new confirmed cases, but it doesn't make a statistically significant bump in the total confirmed cases. So you might go from 10 new cases a day to 50 new cases a day to maybe even 100 new cases a day. But it's still, as you move forward with the total confirmed numbers of cases, it's not making a huge bump in what's going on. Sweden finally started coming down. They were doing okay, then they had an uptick, and now it looks like they're coming down again. We also have Canada coming down. America, we've discussed, here, let me try to get that for you. You can see America here has basically, it didn't ever really come down, but they're now back up at the same angle that they were before, meaning they're starting to go up very sharply in the number of cases per week. So you can see here that they've had 413,000 new cases in the past week, and they're at 3.3 million. So that's basically the kind of trends that we're trying to track. Israel, at this point, remains the only country that has had a full-blown second wave that was bigger than the first wave. Iran never really got past their first wave, so they're having another wave now, but they didn't really get past the first wave. Israel is definitely the only developed country to have a second wave, but what we're going through now is unprecedented. So we're tracking all of this, and it's important to note. The next video I do is going to discuss how we got into this mess, how to fix it, and what's going on. Sorry, my video keeps turning off. That's basically where we're at. I wish everyone to stay well and to stay healthy. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.